The morning light of Kepler Station's artificial sun filtered through the large windows of Lecture Hall 7. Zara Veltai adjusted her position in the uncomfortable metal chair, her 4 crystalline arms folding neatly as she waited for class to begin. The xenobiology course was her favorite subject this semester, even though Professor Keth Mornglow could be quite boring at times. Students from dozens of different worlds filled the curved rows of seats. There was Grix, a purple-skinned Altarian who always sat in the front row. Behind him sat 3 Centaurian students, their tentacles moving slowly as they prepared their note-taking devices. A few Rigelians clustered together near the back, their large eyes blinking in unison as they whispered among themselves. Zara had been studying at the academy for 2 years now. She came from Altair Prime, where her people lived in crystal cities that grew from the planet's surface like frozen music. Her species was known for their patience and attention to detail, which made them excellent scientists and researchers. The Galactic Coalition often hired Altarians to catalog new discoveries and maintain important records. The heavy doors at the front of the room slid open with a soft hiss. Professor Mornglow entered, his long tentacles swaying as he walked to the podium. He was a Centaurian, one of the older species in the galaxy, and he had been teaching at Kepler Station for over 30 years. His green skin had faded to a lighter shade with age, and his 3 eyes moved independently as he looked over the class. "Good morning, students," Professor Mornglow said, his voice carrying the slight musical quality that all Centaurians had. "Today we continue our study of extinct species. Please turn your attention to the main display." The large holographic screen behind him flickered to life, showing images of various creatures that no longer existed in the galaxy. Zara had always found these lessons both fascinating and sad. So many species had disappeared over the millions of years of galactic history. Some had evolved into other forms. Others had been destroyed by natural disasters, and a few had simply vanished without explanation. "We will focus today on one of the most recent extinctions," Professor Mornglow continued. "A species that destroyed itself only 230 years ago. They called themselves humans." The screen showed an image of a bipedal creature standing upright. It had smooth skin, 2 arms, 2 legs, and a relatively large head. The creature looked almost familiar to Zara, though she could not say why. She had never seen anything like it before, yet something about its shape seemed right somehow. "Humans evolved on a planet they called Earth," the professor explained. "They were a young species, having developed space travel only recently before their extinction. Archaeological evidence suggests they were highly aggressive and territorial. They fought constant wars among themselves and damaged their planet's environment beyond repair." Zara took notes as Professor Mornglow described human society. According to the official records, humans had divided themselves into competing groups called nations. These nations fought over resources, territory, and beliefs. They created weapons capable of destroying entire cities and poisoned their own air and water in their rush to build more. Technology. The final war occurred, in what humans called the year 2157, Professor Mornglow said. By this time, their planet was already dying from pollution and climate change. The war finished what their carelessness had started. Within 50 years, no trace of human civilization remained. The screen showed images of a blue and green planet, beautiful and alive. Then the images changed to show the same planet covered in gray clouds, its oceans dark and its land scarred. Zara felt a strange sadness looking at the dead world. She wondered what it had been like when it was alive, what sounds the humans had made, what their cities had looked like. "It is important to study these failed species," Professor Mornglow continued, "because they teach us valuable lessons. Humans show us what happens when a species chooses violence over cooperation, short-term gain over long-term survival. They had potential, but they wasted it on primitive emotions like hatred and greed." As the professor spoke, Zara noticed something odd. 3 rows behind her and to the left sat a student she had never seen before. This was strange because Zara knew all the students in advanced xenobiology. There were only 43 of them, and they had been studying together for months. The unknown student sat quietly, but something about her posture seemed different from the others. While most students leaned forward or slouched in their seats, she sat perfectly straight, her hands folded in her lap. She appeared to be paying very close attention to Professor Mornglow's lecture, but not in the same way as the other students. She looked almost tense. Zara tried to get a better look at the mysterious student without being obvious. The being appeared to match the description Professor Mornglow was giving of humans. She had smooth skin, 2 arms, 2 legs, and brown hair that fell to her shoulders. But that was impossible. Humans were extinct. Everyone knew that. The human form was quite primitive, Professor Mornglow was saying. They had poor night vision, weak natural defenses, and could only survive in a very narrow range of environmental conditions. They made up for these weaknesses with technology, but their aggressive nature meant they used their tools for destruction rather than creation. The strange student's hands tightened slightly. Zara noticed this small movement and wondered what it meant. Was the student upset by something the professor had said? But why would anyone be upset by facts about an extinct species? Their social structure was chaotic, Professor Mornglow continued. Unlike civilized species that work together for the common good, humans were driven by individual desires. They competed against each other even within their own communities. This made them unpredictable and dangerous. Now Zara was sure she saw the unknown student's jaw clench. The reaction was so subtle that probably no one else noticed. But Zara's people were trained to observe small details. Something was definitely bothering this student about the lecture on humans. Are there any questions about this extinct species before we move on? Professor Mornglow asked, preparing to change the display to show information about another lost civilization. For a moment, the lecture hall was quiet. Then slowly the mysterious student in the back raised her hand. Professor Mornglow looked surprised. Questions about extinct species were rare, since there was usually little debate about established facts. Yes, you have a question about humans? The student stood up slowly. Every eye in the room turned to look at her. Zara felt a strange electricity in the air as if something important was about to happen. Professor, the student said, her voice clear and strong. I think there might be an error in your curriculum. The lecture hall became completely silent. Even the quiet humming of the air circulation system seemed to stop. Every student turned to stare at the young woman who had just suggested that their professor might be wrong about established galactic history. Professor Mornglow's 3 eyes focused on her with surprise. In his 30 years of teaching, students rarely questioned the official records, especially about something as well documented as an extinction. His tentacles twitched slightly, which Zara knew was a sign that he was either amused or annoyed. An error? Professor Mornglow repeated, his musical voice carrying a note of skepticism. Young lady, these records have been verified by the Galactic Historical Commission. The extinction of humanity is one of the most thoroughly documented events in recent galactic history. The student remained standing, completely calm despite having the attention of 43 classmates and 1 very distinguished professor. Zara noticed that she showed none of the nervous habits that most students displayed when speaking in class. She was not fidgeting, shifting her weight, or avoiding eye contact. Instead, she looked directly at Professor Mornglow with a steady gaze. My name is Kate Morrison, the student said, and I believe the documentation you are referring to is incomplete. Professor Mornglow's tentacles moved more rapidly now, definitely showing annoyance. Miss Morrison, I do not recall you being enrolled in this course. Are you auditing this class? I'm enrolled, Kate replied calmly. I registered 3 days ago under the Special Circumstances provision for refugee students. Zara leaned forward in her seat. The Special Circumstances provision was rarely used. It allowed students from planets affected by disasters or wars to enroll immediately, without going through the normal application process. But Kate did not look like a refugee. She was clean, well-dressed, and spoke galactic standard perfectly. Very well, Professor Mornglow said, clearly wanting to move past this interruption. What exactly do you believe is incomplete about the historical record of human extinction? Kate took a small step forward, and when she spoke, her voice carried easily to every corner of the room. The records are incomplete because they assume that the war on Earth killed all humans everywhere. But humans had already begun to spread to other worlds before their home planet died. Several students gasped. Grix, the purple Altarian in the front row, raised one of his 4 hands. But Professor, the records show that humans only had basic space travel. They could barely reach their own moon. That is what the records show, Kate agreed. But the records only include official government activities. They do not include private exploration, research stations, or small colonies that were established without official approval. Professor Mornglow's skin color began to shift from green to a darker blue-green, which Zara recognized as a sign of growing irritation. Miss Morrison, you are suggesting that an entire species could hide from galactic notice for over 200 years. That is simply impossible, is it? Kate asked. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small device that Zara did not recognize. Professor, may I approach your workstation? I suppose, Professor Mornglow said reluctantly. Kate walked down the stepped rows to the front of the classroom. As she passed Zara's seat, Zara caught a scent she had never smelled before. It was not unpleasant, just different from any species she knew. Kate moved with a smooth, efficient gait that reminded Zara of the way predators moved on her home world, but without any sense of threat or aggression. At the professor's workstation, Kate connected her device to the classroom's main computer system. I would like to show you some information that is not in the official records. The holographic display behind Professor Mornglow flickered and changed. Instead of showing the dead planet Earth, it now displayed star charts that Zara had never seen before. The charts showed several star systems near Earth's original location, with small markers indicating the presence of some kind of settlements. These are human colonies, Kate said, turning to face the class. They were established between 2089 and 2156, mostly by private groups who were concerned about the situation on Earth. When the final war began, these colonies went into hiding. One of the Rigelian students raised a large clawed hand. But why would they hide? Why not contact the Galactic Coalition? Kate's expression became sad for a moment. Because they were afraid. Humans had learned that their aggressive reputation preceded them. Every time they tried to make contact with other species, they were met with suspicion or hostility. So they decided to watch and wait. Wait for what? Asked another student. To learn, Kate replied. To understand how galactic society really worked. To figure out how they could contribute without causing fear or conflict. Professor Mornglow had been studying the star charts on the display. His tentacles were moving in the slow, careful pattern that indicated deep thought. Miss Morrison, even if we accept that small groups of humans survived, they would have needed resources, technology, and knowledge to establish viable colonies. How would refugees from a dying planet obtain these things? Kate smiled for the first time since she had started speaking. They would not have obtained them, Professor. They would have created them. She touched her device again, and the display changed to show technical diagrams that made several students gasp in amazement. Zara recognized some of the symbols as being related to advanced physics and engineering, but the specific applications were beyond her understanding. Humans are very good at solving problems, Kate continued. When they were faced with survival on worlds with no infrastructure, they developed new technologies. When they needed to remain hidden, they created advanced camouflage and stealth systems. When they needed to understand other species, they developed translation methods and cultural analysis techniques that are far more sophisticated than anything currently used by the Coalition. You speak of humans as if you have personal knowledge of them, Professor Mornglow observed, his voice taking on a suspicious tone. Kate looked directly at him. That is because I do have personal knowledge of them, Professor. I am one of them. The silence that followed was so complete that Zara could hear her own heartbeat. She stared at Kate with new eyes, seeing the smooth skin, the bilateral symmetry, the hair, and the strangely expressive face that seemed to show emotions more clearly than any species Zara had ever encountered. That is impossible, whispered Grix from the front row. Is it? Kate asked the same question she had asked before, but this time her voice held a challenge. Look at me and tell me what you see. Zara looked. She saw a being that matched every description Professor Mornglow had given of the extinct species called humans. She saw someone who moved differently, spoke differently, and seemed to think differently from any other student in the class. And suddenly, Zara realized that Kate Morrison was telling the truth. Kate stood at the front of the classroom, waiting as 43 students and one professor tried to process what she had just told them. Zara watched the different reactions around the room. Some students looked shocked, others appeared skeptical, and a few seemed frightened. Professor Mornglow's tentacles had stopped moving entirely, which Zara knew meant he was thinking very hard. You claim to be human, Professor Mornglow said slowly. But even if that were true, it would prove nothing. One survivor does not mean the species is thriving in secret colonies. You are right, Kate agreed. One individual proves nothing, but I am not here alone, and I am not the only human who has been living among other species. She touched her device again, and the classroom's communication system activated. Computer, please connect me to Dr. Lin Chang in the Medical Research Division. A new voice filled the room, speaking in perfect galactic standard, but with the same unusual accent that Kate had. Kate, is it time? It is time, Kate confirmed. The classroom door opened and a figure entered who appeared to be a tall, thin Rigelian with the characteristic large eyes and pale blue skin. But as the figure approached the front of the room, something strange happened. The blue skin began to shimmer and fade, revealing smooth pink skin underneath. The large eyes became smaller and more expressive. The tall, thin frame remained the same, but everything else changed. Holographic disguise, the newcomer explained to the stunned class. My name is Dr. Lisa Chang. I have been working in the Medical Research Division of this station for 15 years. Most of my colleagues believe I'm Rigelian. Zara felt her crystalline skin tingling with shock. Dr. Chang was well known throughout the station. She had developed several important medical treatments and had published dozens of research papers. The idea that she had been human all this time seemed impossible. This is some kind of trick, declared Torex, a red-skinned student from Draconis Major. You cannot expect us to believe that humans have been hiding among us for years. Kate looked at him calmly. I do not expect you to believe anything without proof. Professor Mornglow, would you like to test whether I am really human? Professor Mornglow's tentacles began moving again, showing his curiosity. What kind of test did you have in mind? Any kind you choose, Kate replied. Medical scans, genetic analysis, physical examinations. Test my reflexes, my reasoning abilities, my cultural knowledge. Compare me to the descriptions in your historical records. The professor considered this for a moment. Then he activated his own workstation. Very well. Computer, perform a complete biological scan of the individual designated as Kate Morrison. A soft blue light surrounded Kate as the station's advanced sensors examined her from head to toe. The results appeared on the classroom display within seconds. Zara studied the readouts, comparing them to the human biological data that Professor Mornglow had shown earlier in the lesson. Every measurement matched perfectly. Heart rate, brain structure, bone density, muscle composition, even the chemical makeup of her blood. If Kate was not human, then she was the most perfect imitation ever created. The scan confirms human physiology, Professor Mornglow admitted reluctantly, but this still does not prove that humans exist as a thriving species. For all we know, you could be the last survivor, maintained in some kind of preservation facility. Kate smiled. Would you like me to demonstrate some human capabilities that are not well documented in your historical records? Before the professor could answer, Kate walked over to the classroom's main problem board. This was a complex mathematical puzzle that the Academy used to challenge advanced students. The current problem had been posted 3 days ago, and none of the students had been able to solve it completely. Zara watched as Kate studied the equations and diagrams. The problem involved calculating the optimal trajectory for a spacecraft traveling between 17 different planets, while minimizing fuel consumption and avoiding 3 asteroid fields. Most species would approach this problem by working through each calculation step by step. But Kate did something different. Instead of using the computer terminal, Kate picked up a simple writing stylus and began drawing on the board. She did not write out equations. Instead, she drew flowing lines that seemed to connect different parts of the problem in ways that Zara had never considered. Within 10 minutes, she had created what looked more like artwork than mathematics. The answer is here, Kate said, pointing to a specific intersection of lines on her drawing. Trajectory angle 47.3 degrees, departure time 14.7 standard hours after planetary alignment, fuel consumption reduced by 23% compared to standard calculations. Professor Mornglow quickly input Kate's solution into his computer. His 3 eyes widened as the results appeared. The solution is correct. But how did you arrive at it so quickly? Pattern recognition, Kate explained. Humans see connections that are not always obvious to other species. We think in pictures and stories, not just numbers and logic. Dr. Chang stepped forward. That is why human medical research has been so successful. We do not just treat symptoms. We look for patterns in how different conditions relate to each other. Suddenly, the classroom door burst open with a loud crash. Professor Lyrith stormed in, her silver Zephyrian wings spread wide in anger. Zara immediately felt afraid. Professor Lyrith was known throughout the academy for her harsh temper and dislike of students. "What is this disruption?" Professor Lyrith demanded, her voice sharp and cold. "I can hear noise from this classroom 3 levels down. Some of us are trying to conduct serious research." The atmosphere in the room became tense immediately. Most students had learned to avoid Professor Lyrith whenever possible. Even Professor Mornglow looked uncomfortable in her presence. But Kate did something that surprised everyone. Instead of backing away or apologizing, she walked directly toward the angry Zephyrian. "Professor Lyrith," Kate said, her voice warm and friendly, "I apologize for the disruption. We were having an unexpected discussion about extinct species, and I'm afraid we got a bit excited." Professor Lyrith's wings fluttered with irritation. Extinct species? What could possibly be exciting about dead creatures? "Well," Kate said, moving closer in a way that should have been threatening but somehow was not. "We discovered that one of the species might not be as extinct as we thought. It has led to some very interesting questions about how we catalog and verify galactic history." Something in Kate's tone seemed to catch Professor Lyrith's attention. The Zephyrian's wings folded slightly, showing less aggression. "What species?" Professor Lyrith asked, sounding curious despite herself. "Humans," Kate replied. "It turns out they might have been better at survival than the official records suggest." Professor Lyrith laughed, a harsh sound like metal scraping against stone. "Humans, those violent primitives? If they had survived, we would certainly know about it by now." Kate smiled. "Would we? If you wanted to hide from galactic civilization, how would you do it?" Professor Lyrith considered this question seriously. Despite her reputation for anger, she was known to be very intelligent. "I suppose I would integrate into existing societies. Take on false identities. Avoid drawing attention to myself." "Exactly," Kate agreed. "And what would be the best way to avoid drawing attention?" "To be useful," Professor Lyrith said slowly. "To contribute something valuable that people would miss if I disappeared." "Like medical research?" Kate suggested. "Or perhaps innovative teaching methods that help students learn more effectively." Professor Lyrith's eyes narrowed as she studied Kate and Dr. Chang. Zara could see the moment when understanding dawned on the Zephyrian's face. "You are not what you appear to be," Professor Lyrith said quietly. "None of us are," Kate replied, "but we are exactly who we choose to be." The news of Kate's revelation spread through Kepler Station faster than anyone expected. Within hours, students and faculty were gathering in groups throughout the corridors, speaking in hushed voices about the human who had appeared in Professor Mornglow's xenobiology class. Zara found herself at the center of many conversations, since she had been present when Kate first stood up to challenge the curriculum. 3 days after the classroom incident, Kate invited Zara to meet her in one of the station's observation lounges. This was a quiet area where students often came to study while looking out at the stars. When Zara arrived, she found Kate standing at the large window, gazing out at the swirling colors of the nebula that surrounded Kepler Station. "Thank you for coming," Kate said without turning around. "I wanted to talk to someone who was there from the beginning." Zara approached carefully. Despite everything that had happened, she still felt a little nervous around Kate. Learning that an entire species had been hiding in plain sight for over 2 centuries was difficult to accept. "Are you really human?" Zara asked, then immediately felt embarrassed by the question. Kate smiled and turned to face her. "I really am. Would you like to know more about how we managed to stay hidden for so long?" Zara nodded eagerly. Her curiosity had been growing stronger every day since the classroom incident. "It started with necessity," Kate explained, gesturing for Zara to sit in one of the comfortable chairs near the window. "When the colonies went into hiding, they had to learn everything about galactic society very quickly. They studied languages, cultures, technologies, and social structures. They became experts in every major species in the coalition. But how did they avoid detection?" Zara asked. "Surely someone would have noticed humans living among them." "Some did notice," Kate admitted. "But humans are very adaptable. When direct hiding became impossible, they found other ways to blend in. They became maintenance workers, researchers, administrative assistants, and medical personnel. They took jobs that other species considered boring or unimportant." Kate touched the wall panel, and a holographic display appeared showing star charts with small markers scattered throughout coalition space. These are human settlements, Kate said. Not large colonies, but small communities of a few hundred individuals each. They are located in asteroid fields on unused moons and in space stations that appear to be abandoned. Zara studied the display with amazement. The markers were everywhere, spread throughout the galaxy in places that no one would think to look. But what do they do in these settlements? Zara asked. How do they survive? They work, Kate replied simply. Every human settlement specializes in something useful. Some focus on medical research, others on engineering solutions, still others on agricultural techniques or communication technologies. They develop innovations and then share them with the galaxy through intermediaries. Intermediaries? Kate's expression became more serious. Humans who live openly among other species, usually with false identities. Like Dr. Chang at the medical center or Commander Jake Taylor in the Coalition Defense Force. Zara's eyes widened. Commander Taylor is human too? He has been serving as an Altarian military advisor for 12 years, Kate confirmed. His strategies for peaceful conflict resolution have prevented 3 major wars and saved millions of lives. The observation lounge door opened, and Dr. Chang entered, followed by a tall figure that Zara recognized as Commander Taylor. But instead of his usual Altarian appearance, he now showed his true human form. He had dark skin, short black hair, and the same kind of expressive eyes that Kate had. Zara, Kate said, I would like you to meet some of my colleagues. Over the next hour, Zara learned things that changed her understanding of recent galactic history. The breakthrough medical treatment that had saved thousands of Centaurian children from a genetic disease had been developed by humans. The new agricultural techniques that had ended food shortages on 6 different worlds had been created in human research facilities. The diplomatic protocols that had resolved the territorial dispute between the Rigelians and the Draknari had been written by human social scientists. We have been quietly helping wherever we could, Commander Taylor explained, but always from behind the scenes. We learned from Earth's mistakes that direct interference often makes problems worse. Instead, Dr. Chang added, we focus on providing tools and knowledge that other species can use to solve their own problems. Zara felt overwhelmed by the scope of what she was learning. Why are you telling me all this? Why reveal yourselves now? Kate and her companions exchanged glances. It was Commander Taylor who answered, because the galaxy is facing challenges that require more direct cooperation. The Outer Rim conflicts are getting worse, and there are signs that several species are developing weapons that could threaten entire star systems. We cannot help solve these problems while remaining hidden. Also, Dr. Chang added, we have been preparing for this moment for decades. There are now over 50,000 humans living throughout Coalition space. We have established ourselves in every major institution. We are ready to reveal ourselves and request formal recognition as a Coalition member species. Zara thought about this for a moment. But what if the Coalition refuses? What if they are angry about the deception? Kate looked out the window at the stars. That is a risk we have to take. We have reached a point where we can contribute more openly than we can in secret. The galaxy needs what humans can offer, but it needs to be given freely and honestly. What humans can offer? Zara asked. What do you mean? Perspective, Kate replied. Humans think differently than most other species. We see patterns and connections that others miss. We are good at understanding different viewpoints and finding solutions that work for everyone. Commander Taylor nodded. Most galactic conflicts happen because different species cannot understand each other's motivations. Humans are good at translation, not just of languages, but of ideas and emotions. We want to be bridges, Dr. Chang explained, to help different species work together more effectively. Zara considered everything she had learned. The idea of humans as bridges between species was very different from the image of violent primitives that she had been taught about. What happens next? She asked. Kate smiled. Next, we prepare for the most important presentation in human history. In 2 weeks, the Coalition Council will hold an emergency session to discuss our request for recognition. Representatives from every member species will be there, and we will finally tell our complete story, Commander Taylor added, not just about our survival, but about our hopes for the future of galactic civilization. Dr. Chang leaned forward. Zara, we have a favor to ask. Would you be willing to speak at the council session? As someone who witnessed our revelation and can testify about our intentions? Zara felt a mixture of honor and terror at the suggestion. Speaking before the Coalition Council was something that most beings never had the opportunity to do. "What would I say?" she asked. Kate reached out and gently touched Zara's crystalline hand. "You would tell them what you have seen, that humans are not the violent creatures described in the old records, but people who want to help make the galaxy a better place for everyone." Zara looked at each of the humans in turn. Seeing the hope and determination in their faces, she thought about everything she had learned over the past few days, and about the future that Kate and her people were trying to build. "Yes," she said finally, "I will speak for you." The Coalition Council chamber was the largest room Zara had ever seen. Thousands of representatives from hundreds of different worlds filled the curved seating areas that rose up from the central speaking platform. The air hummed with dozens of different languages being translated in real time by the chamber's advanced communication systems. Zara sat in the witness section, her 4 crystalline arms folded nervously as she waited for her turn to speak. She had practiced her testimony many times over the past 2 weeks, but being here in person felt overwhelming. Representatives from every major species in the galaxy were present, including several that Zara had only seen in pictures before. The session had been going on for 3 hours already. Admiral Rex Thor of the Draknari had spoken first, his red scales gleaming under the chamber lights as he argued that humans were dangerous infiltrators who could not be trusted. His deep voice had filled the chamber with warnings about species that hid their true nature and worked in secret. "How can we trust beings who have deceived us for over 2 centuries? Admiral Rex Thor had demanded. "They have been watching us, studying us, manipulating our societies without our knowledge or consent. This is not the behavior of a species that wants peace." Other speakers had followed with similar concerns. The Rigelian ambassador had questioned whether humans might be responsible for various unexplained events throughout galactic history. The Centaurian trade representative had worried about what other secrets humans might be hiding. But there had also been supporters. Dr. Velneth from the Medical Council had praised the advances that human research had contributed to galactic medicine. Commander Zixtal from the Defense Force had spoken about the effectiveness of human-designed conflict resolution strategies. Now it was time for the human representatives to speak for themselves. President Elena Santos walked to the central platform. Like Kate, she appeared completely human now, without any disguise or false identity. She was a middle-aged woman with gray hair and calm, intelligent eyes. For the past 10 years, she had been serving the Coalition as what everyone believed was a battalion mediator. "Honored representatives," President Santos began, her voice carrying clearly throughout the massive chamber. "I stand before you today not as a stranger, but as someone who has worked alongside many of you for years. Together we have resolved disputes, negotiated treaties, and built the foundations of a more peaceful galaxy." She paused, looking around the chamber at the thousands of beings watching her. "In my 10 years as a mediator, I have made decisions that affected billions of lives. I have helped end wars, establish trade agreements, and create new colonies. I ask you to consider this. Have my decisions benefited all species equally? Have I chosen cooperation over conquest? Have I put understanding before fear?" Murmurs rippled through the chamber as representatives discussed her words. Zara knew that President Santos had an excellent reputation as a mediator. Even Admiral Rex Thor had worked with her successfully on several occasions. President Santos continued, "Humans chose to remain hidden not because we wanted to deceive you, but because we were afraid. Our own history taught us that species with violent reputations are rarely given second chances. So we decided to prove ourselves through actions rather than words." She gestured toward the gallery where Kate, Dr. Chang, Commander Taylor, and dozens of other humans sat. "Every human you see here has spent years serving the Coalition in some capacity. They have been teachers, researchers, medical personnel, engineers, and peacekeepers. They have contributed to every major scientific advance, diplomatic breakthrough, and humanitarian effort of the past 2 centuries. But they did so in secret." Admiral Rex Thor interrupted from his seat. "How can we trust species that operates through deception?" President Santos nodded respectfully to the Admiral. "You are right that we operated in secret, but consider what we did with that secrecy. Did we build weapons? Did we establish military bases? Did we attempt to conquer or control other species?" She activated a holographic display that showed statistical data about galactic conflicts over the past 2 centuries. The evidence shows that Galactic conflicts have decreased by 67% since humans began their quiet integration into coalition society. Medical advances have increased by 43%. Diplomatic resolutions have increased by 59%. Trade disputes have decreased by 38%. The numbers were impressive, and Zara could see that many representatives were taking careful note of them. "We are not asking you to forget that we remained hidden," President Santos said. "We are asking you to judge us by what we did while we were hidden. We used our abilities to help, to heal, to build bridges between species that might otherwise have remained enemies." She looked directly at Admiral Rex Thor. "Admiral, do you remember the Kepler mining dispute 3 years ago? The one where Draknari and Rigelian miners were on the verge of armed conflict over territorial rights?" Admiral Rex Thor's scales shifted color slightly, showing surprise. "Of course. The mediator found a solution that satisfied both sides." "That mediator was me," President Santos said simply. "The solution came from human understanding of how to balance competing needs and find common ground." The chamber erupted in surprised conversations as representatives realized the implications of what they had just heard. When the noise died down, the council speaker announced that it was time for witness testimony. Zara felt her hearts beating rapidly as she was called to the platform. Standing in the center of the massive chamber, surrounded by thousands of beings from across the galaxy, Zara found her voice. "My name is Zara Veltai, and I am a student at Kepler Station," she began. 2 weeks ago, I thought I knew everything about galactic history. I believed that humans were extinct, that they had been violent and destructive, and that their disappearance was probably for the best." She looked up at Kate in the gallery, drawing strength from her friend's encouraging smile. "Then Kate Morrison stood up in my xenobiology class and told us we were wrong. At first I thought she might be crazy, but as I got to know her and other humans, I realized that everything we had been taught about them was incorrect." Zara's voice grew stronger as she continued. "Humans are not violent. They are protective. They do not seek to conquer. They seek to understand. They do not destroy. They build connections between things that seem unrelated." She turned to address Admiral Rex Thor directly. "You ask how we can trust them. I ask you, how can we afford not to? In the past 2 weeks, I have learned more about cooperation and problem-solving from humans than I learned in 2 years of formal education." Zara gestured toward the human section. "They did not reveal themselves because they wanted power or recognition. They revealed themselves because they believe the galaxy needs their help to face the challenges that are coming. And after spending time with them, I believe they are right." The vote, when it finally came, was closer than Zara had expected. Many species were still concerned about the deception, while others were impressed by the contributions humans had made. But in the end, the evidence spoke for itself. Humans had used their hidden status to help rather than harm, to build rather than destroy. The motion to accept humans as a full member species of the coalition passed by a narrow margin. 6 months later, Zara walked into her new classroom at Kepler Station. She was now the teaching assistant for the galaxy's first course in applied interspecies cooperation, taught by Professor Kate Morrison. The students in this class came from more species than had ever studied together before. Zara could see Draknari sitting next to Rigelians, Centaurians working with Altarians, and humans collaborating with everyone. "Good morning, class," Kate said, her voice warm and welcoming. "Today we are going to study the most important force in the galaxy. It is not gravity or nuclear fusion or quantum mechanics. It is understanding." Zara smiled as she watched Kate begin the lesson. The students were already working together on projects that would have been impossible just months before. They were solving problems, sharing knowledge, and building friendships across species lines. As Kate often said, the strongest species was not the one with the best weapons or the most advanced technology. It was the one that could bring out the best in others. And judging by what Zara could see in this classroom, humans were very good at that indeed. The galaxy had not been conquered by humanity. It had been quietly elevated by it. And now, working together openly for the first time, all the species of the coalition were ready to face whatever challenges the future might bring.